Alright everyone, welcome to another episode of Torchlight 2 Guides. What we'll be looking at today is going into the character classes more thoroughly, and after all, it is extremely essential to understand the spells and the skill tree of each class. And for those who want to play the game with what the game only offers, we're gonna be covering the grounds from elite difficulties as well. Now, I'm not quite sure how much I'll cover in this video, but I'll be making sure to take as much as time possible to be more detailed. I'll also have in consideration to be more explicit for what stats are, so that way a person can be more decisive about the development of its own build by knowing what to reach out when investing the points. The first class we're gonna start off is the embermage, but before that I'll give you guys explanation for the stats. Let me just open the game. There we go. In this graph we have strength, dexterity, focus and vitality. I'd say stats play critical role in the classes as you gain 5 points per level, but also 1 skill point. You'll be able to remove points while having it open in case you're being underdetermined in what you want them into. However, once you close this panel, it's done. You can't set them back as they're being applied forever. So bear in mind how they're invested. At the top here we have fame. In addition, for you guys to understand what fame is, I'd say that fame is similar to the experience bar, but you can only gain fame experience from killing tougher creatures like champion bosses, which will be displayed in the color of pink. Once you gain a level in fame, you'll be rewarded with a skill point, and in looking at the longer run, you'll have more than 100 points in the skill tree to operate with. Alright, back to the stat list. First I'm gonna go with the introduction of the strength. Strength is referred exclusively for the weapons. Adding points to the strength will increase your weapon damage, but also the damage done from the critical strikes. Below it is the dexterity, which increases the chance for critical strike, meaning increases the chances for critical fired from each weapon hit. You guys should know that critical hit is the chance for critical hit, but critical damage is the damage done by the critical. So strength here is displayed for critical damage, but dexterity is for critical chance. Dexterity here also gives you the dodge chance and reducing the fumble recovery. The fumble in this game is described usually as successful landed attacks, because from what I can understand, if I look down into the statistics here, you'll notice that this game has fumble damage penalties, so that means that your normal attacks can sometimes result in a weak attack, which can be displayed in purple color, but dealing damage little to none. Of course, out there is specific boss types that when killed, you have a % for an eye drop, which can be socketed and give you reduction fumble chance. After the dexterity we have focus. Focus now is ideal stat for mage because focus increases your maximum mana, the elemental damage done, but also the execute chance. The terms of execute chance here is clarified as in shooting with both weapons at the same time. Finally, coming to the last stat on the bottom is vitality. Each point added to vitality increases your health, your armor, and your block chance in case you're wearing any shield. The maximum capacity, which includes having any kind of block damage, is 75%. So now that we're done talking about the stats, let's talk about the embermage. Each character class has own special charge bar, and the charge bar for the embermage is to have infinite mana for the period of 12 seconds. And during this period of 12 seconds, the embermage will have also increased spell damage input by 25%. Once the 12 seconds are over, the charge will deplete until you charge it again. The mage class in the games is usually and often recognized with spell casting type. Casting spells with this class is all there is to it, so this game makes no exceptions. You'll quickly realize that the embermage deals elemental damage starting from fire, into ice, down to electricity. These are the 3 skill taps that this class offers, and I've noticed there is one lack of an element, which is the poison. The poison in this class is implemented into the spells of the embermage, but it can be found separately. I have no explanation for what's been going on with the development about the poison, and from what you can see, the poison is contained at only 3 spells, which are called Prismatic Bolt, Elemental Boon, as well as the Elemental Unattunement. But looking for a solution how to add additional poison damage in this element, I think it can be done only with socketing. Prismatic mages can be often found throughout the game because this spell is unlocked from the beginning of the game and it's easily combinable with elemental brands. Have in mind that the DPS of the weapon will have no effect over the elemental spells which you can cast unless it tells you that it does. So be careful out there for the bonus elemental damage in the weapon. That's why wands and staffs are often recommended for this class. Of course, this game has no weapon restriction, so you can choose to wear whatever you feel like. You can choose to wear crossbow or cannon, claws perhaps, maces, or I don't know. You can choose whatever your heart desires, but for me, personally, that will be like deciding to travel the world while being crippled with a bike. And the reason why I think in that particular way is because the skill tree of the embermage. It offers you a spell that only this class has it, and it's called Wand Chaos. But also in the Frost tab, we have the Staff Master skill. Ideally speaking, one way or another, you would want to have your wands or staffs because they often contain elemental damage, and it helps you out with your build order. But if you choose to experiment and burn down this school of build orders, then I'd say this video is reaching just further apart from whatever your creativity build is. However, I wouldn't say no to new builds. As a matter of fact, I would like to see how that will play out. But in my mind, what I have in definition as a concept in a build is the effectiveness from farming. This game is about farming after all. The builds that I'll be speaking will be based on the efficiency from farming, and telling it in this particular way, time itself in this game has relevant cost to me, and when it comes down to farming, I'd say the consideration of the time is often placed in terms of farming speed. I mean, everyone has a potential goal for how fast they want to farm. Looting infinitely here would be unlikely the case we usually seek. Anyhow, the build order in a mage isn't always defined by having all attribute spells of one specific element. For example, fire mages are good for mass control because most of the fire spells in the Inferno skills contain area of effect spells. But that doesn't necessarily mean if you want to be a fire mage you have to strictly stick to fire spells or even specific weapon only. You can combine and make plenty of combinations that include many different build orders. Also note that each active skill tree has 3 tiers that contain maximum 15 points. But starting with my build for Fire Mage, my thought for solid Fire Mage is having shield and any good one-handed weapon, because you can take Immolation Aura, which at its tier 3 gives you 15% more reduced damage, and combined with Death's Bounty that heals you health and mana per kill. Now if you take to mind that you can add sockets that give you enough health or make yourself to take less physical damage, then your build as a fire mage who can deal with huge masses would be probably effective. Ice mages on the other hand gain their leverage with the immobility of the monsters by making them freeze, and great exemplary for ice spells is Frostwave, which combined with Frozen Fate and Icebrand, while also having increased charge rate from Charge Mastery. At its tier 3 this spell increases 5 frost waves and it's all over the ground, which makes you with a solid defense and allows you to hold your ground in a different way. You can choose to take Frost Phase, which makes you blink from one location to another and make yourself even more flexible. But if you think your total health is being low, you can also take Prismatic Rift and teleport enemies further away from you. To add damage up, Hailstorm here is an excellent spell. At tier 3, this spell makes all units more vulnerable to electric and ice damage by 60%, which makes monsters way more vulnerable. Another great spell combination is the Ice Prison with the Thunder Lotus, so you can have enemies trapped, or perhaps you can substitute the Thunder Lotus with the Infernal Collapse, because the Infernal Collapse is a spell that takes a second or two for the explosions to have an effect. A great combination could be also strong if you combine Staff Mastery with Shock Bolts, and then take Elemental Boon, which makes your mage all element based from your weapon DPS. In my build, for example, I aimed for 2 wands that gives me high cast speed because what I have upgraded is Wand Chaos. Wand Chaos in this case gives me 34% chance for the possibility of a bizarre effect hit. I also have Shock Bolts, which spell comes from the Storm skills. It involves my weapon damage per second. It says 53% of my weapon DPS goes into electric damage, so unlike the Prismatic Bolt, which is purely elemental based, it makes not only the percent for bizarre effect hit chance high enough from the cast speed, but it also inflicts electric damage based on the DPS from my weapon. And in addition to extend my damage, I have Hailstorm, which, not to forget, at tier 3 makes all units more vulnerable to an ice and electric damage by 60%. So make sure you use it before attacking or casting spells. Now if we bring up and involve the armory as well the socketing part into our role, these numbers start to stack up, and we're beginning to talk about some huge number that involves late game. This is why I often repeat that socketing has enormous role for the build, because it matters and scales with the same problem even in the small levels as well. Armory contributes a lot when it comes down to sustainability with physical armor, so globally speaking damage is important, but the phase of the game dictates differently with the game difficulties, so you'll often lose track of stuff while aiming to keep your life intact. And if you're an elite, you will also have to consider the fact that monsters which are approaching you will have higher health, because often I see the lack of equipments in players and they put in the position where it's feeling necessary to kite them. But knowing where to farm is also important part, as from the beginning of the elite difficulty, its early stage game makes you think it's easy and everything is skillable. Trust me, things will slightly get out of hand faster than you think, so unless you know your build order and properly how to equip your gear, it's hard to do the math for everything that's happening for the progress of the game. I mean, it's not easy to maintain the position you truly want when you're not aware of these things, but once you do, you start to get the bigger picture. You will also start to realize things like differences between how much damage and how much health you need is one of them, as realizing when it's more of a necessity to be careful not to get hit, or perhaps the other way around, to have higher amount of health but being aware of longer time spending and clearing up the dungeons. All I can say to those playing Elite is that you have to be careful, double the amount of which you were up until now, and if you want some extra tips, then that would be to always keep portals and open them in front of a boss area, because you can't teleport in a boss area. So in case you die, you won't have to spend a huge amount of saved money, but rather spawn in the base and teleport back in front of the boss. Anything extra to do things easier for you guys is to be telling you which bosses drop 100% a unique item, and because it requires huge effort to name them all. I'll be putting that info in the description so you guys can farm and reload dungeons like I recommended in my previous video. However, for those who have gotten bored of just hosting a game over and over just to reset the bosses in a game, once you enter the 4th dungeon, regardless of the act map, the first one that you've been into automatically starts to respawn all the progress and all the monsters that you've killed so far in it. But being short on time, I think that's about it from what I can just cover right now, and I hope to see you guys until next time.